All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Rebecca Hart-Holder. I'm the Executive Director of NARAL Pro-Choice Massachusetts, and I am so excited to be here today with Senator Ed Markey. We're live on Facebook, which is a first for us, but not a first for the Senator. He is a pro at Facebook Live. And we're also hosting this on Zoom webinar. Thank you all for coming today. I can see the numbers climbing. I know there's been a lot of interest and excitement about this conversation. I wanted to just start off with some housekeeping. For those of you joining us on Zoom, you can submit questions through the chat box. And if you have any questions for our special guest, you can submit them there. We'll save time at the end to answer your questions, and we'll do our very best to get through all of them. And Kate Freilich will be joining us on screen later to facilitate the question and answer session. So I wanted to start out by acknowledging that we plan to start this conversation today. We planned it 2 weeks ago, and we were planning to talk about the COVID-19 crisis and its impact on reproductive health care, gender equality, the influence on judicial appointments, and the disparate impact of the COVID-19 crisis on communities of color and low-income communities. But because of the events of the last week, we are going to pivot today. We thought it would be wrong not to acknowledge the murder of George Floyd and not to acknowledge that we're seeing a national uprising against state-sanctioned violence aimed at Black and brown people. And also not to acknowledge that the president is fomenting hate and violence right now, including using a church for a really empty and offensive publicity stunt and ordering peaceful protesters dispersed through violent means. Now, historically, NARAL Massachusetts has been a predominantly white organization, and it's something that we are working very hard on confronting and transforming, but it isn't enough. And we and I are committed to doing the work of listening and evolving and changing to dismantle oppressive structures that harm communities of color, even our own. So for too long, we really believe that the reproductive rights movement has not done enough intersectional work that explicitly ties reproductive freedom and freedom from reproductive oppression to racial justice. And we are committed to making NARAL Massachusetts an organization that does that work. And right now that means uplifting the voices of people of color at the front lines of the fight for equality. And it means examining our own role in dismantling white supremacy. And now I'd really be honored to bring my friend Senator Markey into the conversation. Senator Markey has served in the United States Senate since 2013, where he's been a national leader in protecting and advancing the rights of workers, women, immigrants, communities of color, and the LGBTQ community. Throughout his tenure in the Senate, Senator Markey has been an absolute champion of social justice. He believes that fighting for women's rights means fighting for health, equality, and dignity. And he's really been at the forefront of the efforts to stop the Trump administration's repeated attacks on women. Most recently, he opposed oh boy, I guess that was nearly 2 years ago, but he opposed the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. He's opposed the Title X gag rule, and he's really been stalwart in his efforts to block any attempts to overturn Roe v. Wade. His pro-choice track record earned him multiple 100% ratings from NARAL Pro-Choice America, who endorsed him in August of 2019. He's also been a great friend to me and reached out immediately when I took the position, and I have been so grateful for his leadership and all that he's done for the organization. So I really thank you so much for being here, Senator. I appreciate your willingness to change the direction of our conversation today, and I'm looking forward to talking. So I want to start at the outset just obviously acknowledging that we're both white, and white people's primary role right now really needs to be listening and uplifting the demands of people of color, particularly Black voices. But I feel strongly that we'd be failing as white allies if we didn't use this previously planned event to elevate this moment and to discuss how we can end the state-sanctioned racialized violence. So I'm planning to spend 15 or 20 minutes talking about current events, and then we'll transition to reproductive freedom. So I just wanted to start on a really human level and just check in with you and kind of ask how you're thinking and feeling about these protests.
Well, and thank you, Rebecca, and thanks to everybody who has joined us today for our our chat. We're in the world of Zoom now, so we've all made the transition to this world, and I don't think we're ever going back actually fully to the way in which we were communicating. But this is a good time to have this conversation, Rebecca. And we thank NARAL for everything that they do to advance the healthcare agenda for women, all women in our country. And that's really been the premise of your organization right since it began. And today, we can see all across the country what the reaction is to the murder of George Floyd. We can see a president who nominated Supreme Court justices who obviously are right-wing and antithetical to the values which everyone on this call stand for. And we can also see the pain in the Black community. Black lives matter. Black voices matter. And I think later on this year, Black votes are going to matter too. I think Donald Trump has, unleashed something here that that is going to be historic in terms of the way in which people respond. And when I think of George Floyd, I think of the original sin that's built into our Constitution, and that is the legalization of slavery. We fought a civil war. A lot of it came out of the abolitionist movement in Massachusetts. But then after the Civil War and a brief period of Reconstruction that gave African Americans their rights down south, that was all swept away. And we had to move all the way to the 1950s and 60s to recommence that struggle. And so it's really not that long ago, And all of those conditions still fester in many parts of the country. And the attitudes, the structural racism that's built into our criminal justice system, the structural racism that's built into our healthcare system, into our educational system, into our transportation system, it's just built in, and to our environmental system. We know Black and brown people have always breathed different air than white people out in the suburbs. Okay, that's just absolutely true, and that means that those people who are Black and brown are actually, because of their proximity to worse environmental conditions, more prone to having asthma and therefore more subject to being a victim of coronavirus, because the underlying condition there has already been attacking their respiratory systems, and they have those conditions that are much higher percent than white people do. So the coronavirus has lifted up a rock, and we can see who the essential workers are. We can see who those are who are most affected. The people who have to go to work, they're immigrants, they're Black, they're brown. They're the ones that have to take the risk of bringing it back home to their families again. So we can see it now. We can see it all very clearly, who's essential and who's not essential to actually have to show up. These people can't Zoom into a supermarket to be a cashier. They can't Zoom over to the sanitation department. They've got to go there. They have to take the risk. And we can see it. And in a way, it's such a good thing that we can see them. And now we can say, well, what do we owe them and their families? What do we owe them? Don't we owe them better health care? Don't we owe them better child care? Don't we owe them better sick leave? Don't we owe them higher incomes for what they do? Don't we owe them for what they've done? They've been there the whole time doing their job, and now we can see how invaluable they are to our society. And they're just so disproportionately Black and brown people, lower income people. And what George Floyd has done is it's just further re-emphasized how the criminal justice system, doesn't really work for Black people the way it does for white people. Now, as you said, Rebecca, I'm a white male. My father drove a truck for the Hood Milk Company. And when I was a kid, I was thinking, oh my goodness, I don't come from Winchester or Newton. I'm from Malden. And my father's a milkman. But the truth is, there really were no barriers for me. I just had to work hard, like my mother told me to, study, and then you could progress. And so my father's son is a senator, but I didn't really feel those discriminatory barriers, except maybe it was, kind of a sense, oh my God, these people have more money than me. But if you worked hard, you could make it through the system. Well, that's not true for Black and brown people in America. And they know it because they live it every single day. So when a Black woman makes only 63 cents on the dollar of a white man in America, when a Latina makes only 57 cents on the dollar of a white man, and we know if we just eliminated that pay disparity, half of all poverty in America would go away. We just eliminated that, and it still sits there, then we have a problem. And a lot of these protests are speaking to that reality with regard to who they are and how they are impacted by the economic system in our country. When black men and Black women are imprisoned at 5 times the rate of white people, 5 times, that creates just structural, long-term impacts on all of those families, because there hasn't been an attempt to find an alternative way to provide that care. When African American women die from pregnancy-related causes at 3 times the rate of white women, which is something that NARAL has talked about for years and years and years, that's all built into the inequality that's in our healthcare system, the racial bias. The same thing is true for Latinas. So this is really about something that's a larger discussion in our country, and you can feel the anger coming out. There's they asked the ancient Greek philosopher once, when would we know true justice? And he answered, we will know true justice when those who have not been harmed are as angry as those who have been harmed. And I think that that's how we're feeling now. We're angry. We're angry. We can see why they're protesting. We can see why they're standing up. And now we get a chance to do something about it. And so from my perspective, it's hopefully a historic turning point. I live here in Malden. I live in the house that I was raised by my father and my mother. And now most of the families here in my neighborhood are Haitian, 2 families, 3 families. And I've been talking to them over the last 3 or 4 days, especially the Haitian American men. And they just tell me how frequently they get stopped, how much more frequent it is than a white man in a car driving through particular parts of eastern Massachusetts. And they just kind of accept it, they hate it, and they know what it's all about. But these are helpful conversations, again, for me, just to be talking to them out on the street, because it's touched a nerve that we have a responsibility as leaders to do something to rectify it.
One more personal question before we dig into the policy piece. I'm curious what leaders of color you're really looking to help shape your response and your thinking, and who you're reading, and how you're supporting your Black and your Black staff and the people of color on your staff. It's certainly something that, I've been thinking a lot about as a leader, and really looking to the reproductive justice movement and the women who lead that movement to center and amplify their voices. So curious where you're finding that.
Yeah, well, obviously, Rachel Rollins is my good friend, and Rachel is helping me in my campaign, as is NARAL. Thank you for that. But Rachel's my good friend, and Rachel and I have been partnering on advancing this goal over the last several years of trying to rethink criminal justice, trying to rethink how we treat, especially African-American young men in our society. And the same thing is true for my conversations with Nika Elegado, with Liz Miranda. But I'm talking with Cory Booker as well. Cory is my good friend. And Cory and I actually, tomorrow, we're going to introduce a resolution, believe it or not. So he and I have decided we're going to introduce a resolution tomorrow into the Senate. There was a case in 1982 Supreme Court case, which actually says that a family of a victim cannot sue a
I
police
remember
officer.
this case from law school. It's horrifying.
So it's called a qualified immunity.
Mm-hmm.
Qualified immunity to kill someone, and not be liable in a civil court, so that they can come after you for damages. So what Corey and I have decided over the last 2 days is we're going to begin the movement to repeal that, so that these families can get justice, that we can have those trials, that those police officers are sitting there in the witness box, that the families can be taking action, even if the criminal justice system fails, right? That we still give them their trial. We give them their ability to recover from those individuals. So we're going to do that. And again, I think what's going to happen is across the board, we're going to be seeing that African-American young men, 2 million of them were imprisoned in the 1990s as part of the crack cocaine. Not powdered cocaine, because that was a white person's cocaine, but crack cocaine, 2 million. And so Corey and I, there's a small handful of us on this right now. It's Corey's idea that we have a whole debate in the country about reparations. This all goes back to slavery. Let's just have the debate. Let's just go back to the beginning. And he's also got another bill that I'm partnering with him on called the Next Step Act. And what that says is, all right, going forward, why don't we just expunge the records of these kids that we arrested, in this crack cocaine? Why don't we give them back their right to vote? Why don't we just do away with 3 strikes and you're out? Why don't we just have this debate about changing this system that winds up with these 5 times higher number of African Americans in prison? And let's just have the debate. But this is giving us the kind of the triggering moment to be able to do this. And I can feel, the passion amongst all of these people, because I feel it as well. And, when I was 17 in this house, just sitting out on the porch, just reading James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time. It came out when I was like a junior in high school. This is what he was talking about. Kind of, in many ways, he was talking about the failure of religion in America to actually deal with this issue, that it wasn't actually calling out all of this systemic racism, and that the society was going to pay a price, which it did in 1967, 68. The riots that we saw then are the predecessors of the riots we're seeing today. So this time, let's just hope we do it once and for all. But the first step is getting rid of the racist. That's all you can really say about him. The racist who sits in the Oval Office, he's got to go. And we just have to fight him and do everything we can to make sure that's the case.
That's a big question I have for you, because I have to say I watched in absolute horror last night as the military was used to disperse peaceful protesters. I woke up this morning, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs was patrolling in DC. They were using helicopters to disperse crowds, tear gas against peaceful protesters. I mean, I keep thinking, where's the red line, right? When are we going to do something to stop him? And I understand that we have a moment in November and that voting is really critical, but I'm curious from your perspective, sitting in the Senate, what can we do today to check his power?
Well, that's what we're trying to determine right now, because obviously Mitch McConnell determines what bills come out on the floor of the Senate. So what we're going to do is we're going to propose a whole series of bills, including mine with Corey's, and try to get unanimous consent from the Republicans. Let's debate this issue. Let's debate this one. Let's have our debate finally, okay, on each and every one of these issues. And if the Republicans want to say no, 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 then let's have at it. Let's just have an election on this. We'll lay out our social justice agenda. Piece by piece. This is what we have to do to make sure that what we're seeing today, these protesters on the streets of the country, speaking, crying, chanting, kneeling, but it's all in the effort to create social justice. And so we're going to try to do it on the Senate floor. I was just on a conversation for the last hour, actually, right before this, with Chuck Schumer and Cory Booker and Kamala all talking about, what should we do now? How do we confront this? And we have to be smart politically to frame it in a way that puts Trump on the defensive, because he's just channeling Richard Nixon. He's just channeling Spiro Agnew from 50 years
He's
ago.
Beyond Nixon at this point.
Right. Yeah, no, what I mean is he saw it. He saw how Nixon divided the country. America, love it or leave it. All that. It's all just rechanneled. But my God, it's 2020, and and he's still saying he can't see a difference between the protesters in Charlottesville. They all look like they're protesting. What's the difference, huh?
Yeah.
One are wearing Confederate flags, and the other one are black people out in the street getting run over. So we've got a moment here, and my hope is that this can be the watershed. Okay. Yet I do believe that white families are watching this in horror, that it's their country, and it's happening right now, and it's 2020, and it's just unacceptable, and it can unleash an activism in us that just wins the House, wins the Senate, wins the presidency, have a president named Supreme Court justices, have president named an attorney general, a secretary of education, secretary of health, that reflects these values that we have. And then let's go. Let's just have our FDR moment, where he put Social Security on the books. He put all these laws on the books. Let's do it. Let's do it with sick leave. Let's do it with childcare. Let's do it with an annual income that everyone that has for their family. So all of that, from my perspective, is where we are at right now. And then the challenge is, can we rise to meet Donald Trump, where he is, and just take him on, and then try to rally people of goodwill to our side. So I'm an optimist. I would not be in this business if I was not an optimist. So I think this is our year. I think this is the year where the counter revolution, wins, and then we win forever.
So before I transition, one last question. I know, being a Bay Stater, sometimes it can feel, it's wonderful that our delegation, is so progressive, stands for these values, and yet it can be frustrating because it feels like you making a phone call to somebody's office who already supports the thing that you're calling in support of. So, and I always want to hear from our elected officials, what is helpful to you for us to do to help propel your work forward in Washington?
Well, what we've learned actually over the last 2.5 months is this Zoom thing, it works. It works. You don't have to say, hey, I can't be in the meeting in Philly. I can't be in the meeting in Pittsburgh. I can't be in the meeting in Lansing. That this interconnectivity is absolutely magical, and that where we are can resonate out and into Maine, into Pennsylvania, into Michigan, as we try to win these Senate seats, as we try to win, perhaps narrowly, the Electoral College votes in Maine and in New Hampshire. And so they're not so far away. Only in Massachusetts are people who live 30 miles away. Oh my goodness, 30 miles away in New Hampshire. Huh? Oh my goodness, how can we do that? So Zoom has reduced it down to, just hitting the Zoom link.
Yep.
And saying, we want to organize here something. And by the way, none of this is happening in person anymore politically. It's all going to happen on Zoom. So it means there are no boundaries. There are no barriers, and the people in state and out of state have just gotten used to it.
Right.
And I'm doing an event later on this afternoon with Alyssa Milano, and she's going to be in LA, but she might as well be in Medford, and I'm in Malden. Right. It's like it's all one place. So I guess what I would say is that we've moved from the telephone to fax machines to cable TV, but in a way, this has been an education for everybody, including me, by the way. Including me. I know more about all this technology now. I'm the author of the laws that created the broadband revolution. Without my laws in 1996, wouldn't exist. Not one home had broadband. Not one home in America had broadband in 1996. Today, a 14-year-old considers it a constitutional right to have a 50-inch HD interactive screen, and she's got her wireless device on her lap at the same time, right? That's the world that we're living in today. And I think a lot of adults are now understanding it a lot better, how this whole world works, in a way that Donald Trump does, by the way. He doesn't worry about state boundaries. He's just, he's the master of Twitter and Facebook and reality TV. So I guess you got to organize, not agonize. It's definitely something we can figure out. I'll be a partner with you in any way you would like to have me be doing it. But we can cross the state lines, okay? We have a lot of activists that want to do a lot of things. That could be phone calls. That could be the phone call you make on one of these things.
Yep.
You can be calling Medford, or you can be calling Medford, Oregon. It doesn't know the difference. It's just, you know, you can make the call. So we can be organizing in ways that help to ensure that we're using kind of the trampoline of the technology to magnify our voices in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And I'll say the same way, in the same way that the abolitionists, they went wherever they had to go. The suffragettes, they went wherever they had to go. The Freedom Riders left, they left from Boston Common to go south, you know, in the 1960s. They had to go there. Well, we can all go there now. Zoom makes it possible for us to do these things. And maybe with some creativity, you know, and bridge building into these other communities, we can have a whole new experience for these final about 150 days to go. But it's 150 days that can turn this year into 1932, can turn it into that year where Herbert Hoover just doesn't get it, and we're getting rid of this guy. Yeah. And we're moving in, huh?
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Well, I appreciate you entering into this conversation today. And it's hard to transition, but I am going to move us to reproductive health care and gender equity, because I've said over and over again to my staff and to our supporters that, it was really clear at the beginning of the COVID pandemic that no matter what else is going on, reproductive health care is time sensitive and it can't wait. And it's clear that this pandemic has really widened the gender gap, particularly for women of color, as you said, disproportionately essential workers. And, unfortunately, there are women disproportionately bear the brunt of childcare responsibilities still in our society. So I want to direct some of my questions there. And obviously our supporters care deeply about access to reproductive health care. And we think, and we do this work because we believe that Massachusetts has a unique role to play in expanding access to reproductive health care. So I'm wondering, from the 35,000 foot level, how do you think Massachusetts can distinguish itself on reproductive health care?
Well, again, we're not just the Bay State, we're the brain state. And so many of those earlier revolutions all started here in Massachusetts, the activists, and it starts up in our state house as well, so that we're pushing to make sure. And the road debate is a good debate for us because we're Massachusetts and we have to go first. We have to do everything first. That's just the way it is. And other people look at us and they say, well, I can see how they did that. I can see the model that they developed. I can see how they built those coalitions. And then you kind of, can wholesale it, out of Massachusetts. So we actually do have a special responsibility on pretty much every issue to go first. And so I guess from my perspective, that's how I always think. I'm always trying to encourage my allies up in the State House to file an even bolder bill on gun safety, on environmental, going 100% renewables. We go first. Let's just get out. I'll look like, then I look like a reasonable man, right?
Well, that's certainly our theory of the case, that's why the Roe Act is so critically important, not just because we have to break down barriers, but because we have to be the model for the rest of the nation.
So can you talk about that a little bit? What you're doing, what your plan is?
Yeah, well, so we, as you know, because you've been such a great supporter of the Roe Act, are pushing not just for codification of the right to privacy in the Mass General laws, but also for removing barriers that really disproportionately impact low-income people, people of color, and barriers that just create shame and stigma. So, you know, I believe that when the pendulum swings back in 30 years and the Supreme Court, I hope I'm wrong that it'll be 30 years, but when it swings back, that Massachusetts is the place that we have to look to as a nation for having set the pace on access to healthcare, for saying that, reproductive healthcare is healthcare, period, and it has to be treated that way, and it cannot be ostracized from the rest of healthcare. And I know you've been with us on that fight, and I appreciate your help on getting the Roe Act passed. It's been, I believe in the unique role. We played that role on same-sex marriage. We played it on access to universal health care, and it's our moment to play it on access to abortion.
Yeah, actually, I'm an optimist. In 1996, it's only 24 years ago, in the United States House of Representatives, 435 members, 67 people voted no on the Defense of Marriage Act. No, 67 out of 435. Now it's 24 years later, and people say, oh, that's not an issue, same-sex marriage. Who would ever raise that issue? Well, in our country, and there were no parades for the 67 at the time. So, but that's who we are. We're Massachusetts. You got to go first. We have to be the leaders. And so, I want to thank everybody on this call who is leading on Roe, organizing around Roe, making it possible that we create a precedent that then that's used in reverse against what's going on in the Deep South, what's right. going on in these other states, because they have a plan to use those legislatures and those courts down there, and we've got to have our own, because to a very real extent, ultimately the courts follow public opinion. And so the more we win this debate in the court of public opinion, is the more difficult it's going to be for them to roll it back.
Well, let's talk about judges and the Supreme Court. I always joke that I'm a single issue voter, and my issue is the Supreme Court. And I think of all the guests we've had, you have the best kind of bird's eye view into the impact that judges have on policy, and you were right out in front protesting with us on Justice Kavanaugh's nomination. And the thing that terrifies me is that if Trump loses, he leaves a legacy of judicial nominations that reverberate for decades. I was frankly horrified by Senator Graham's statement. I guess it was last week, it seems like 1,000 years ago, that judges over the age of 65 should consider taking retirement. So how do we fix it? How do we fix this judicial nomination system and protect Roe and protect many of the cases that, we believe make us a better country?
Well, what I can do, and what I've been trying to do, is of the 100 senators, I have voted against more of Trump's judges than any other senator. So I'm number one in voting no, especially after Merrick Garland, where it was just a deliberate play, to deny us the Supreme Court seat, which would change the whole fabric of what we're doing right now in terms of all of our strategies. So, and Elizabeth was out campaigning, so she missed a few votes. I think she might have been tying. I think she might have tied me for the most no votes against Trump judges over the last 4 years. And I'm proud of that designation. And I think that's where we have to be for now. The resistance, just doing our best. The next step is this election, just being honest. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Steve Breyer, they're the oldest two on the Supreme Court. We want a Democratic president in 2021 to 25 with the power to be able to, nominate and have a Democratic Senate confirm those nominations. I don't know when the vacancies are going to occur, but we should just be realistic, right? We don't want him to have two more.
Right. We've got to flip the Senate.
That would then fall into your 30-year span right now. Yeah. But if we win this time, it's not necessarily 30 years. It can happen very quickly. You
Right.
know, we can move and take advantage politically of all of these 5 to 4 decisions that are coming out of the Supreme Court on issue after issue. You know, and and it's a challenge for us. Um, we could consider and begin the movement towards putting term limits on Supreme Court justices, and that's something that we could, you know, begin to debate and try to effectuate as well. But the near term, the thing that we really have to do right now is to win this election. And for us, again, I'm going to keep coming back to, we have to win the Electoral College votes in New Hampshire. I mean, we just have to.
Yes.
You know, we got to get rid
imperative.
Huh?
It's imperative. Yeah, there's no other choice.
Yeah, and then there are other strategies that we can adopt, and but we can do that evaluation in the light of Joe Biden being sworn in on January 21st, right?
Yeah.
Now, what else do we want to do to maybe try to change the balance of power on the Supreme Court even right now? You know?
Yeah.
Maybe term limits, or giving each president guaranteed number of appointments. We could move in that direction. But for 150 days, the first order of business has to be just organizing.
Yeah, absolutely. I like you're saying we don't agonize, we organize.
That's what NARAL is. That's why NARAL is such a power. NARAL's a power because you guys do not agonize.
Well, we have a great organizer in Kate Freilich, as you know. I want to talk about the Monthly Economic Crisis Support Act a little bit. I know that you and Senators Harris and Sanders released a plan for economic recovery, and I'm sure a lot of people have heard about it, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to really talk about the bill and how it helps women and families. I think that's the part that I want to really uplift in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, for people who don't know, my wife, Dr. Susan Blumenthal, was the first Deputy Assistant Secretary for Women's Health in America's history. President Clinton named her. She ran Women's Health during the Clinton years, working with Hillary Clinton in the White House to put a spotlight on all the inequities in our healthcare system. She rose to become a 2-star admiral in the Public Health Service and Assistant Surgeon General of the United States. In her career, her focus was women's health. It was all these issues. And she did so knowing how research was just skewed dramatically towards the 6-foot, 180-pound male. So, and then extrapolated over to women for so many diseases. So that's absolutely something that has to be at the heart of this issue, looking at our economic system as it disproportionately impacts women. And women are shouldering the brunt of the pain as part of this crisis, just the way in which our economic system is structured. So what Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders and I decided to do, and we did this 3 weeks ago, we introduced a bill that we're going to be fighting for as part of this next coronavirus pandemic relief package that says that every individual gets $2,000. For a couple, they'd have $4,000. If they had a child, they'd have another $2,000. So that couple with one child will get $6,000 for the month. And then next month, and then the next month, and then the next month, and then the next month, until we come out of this crisis. And what we say is all the experts, all the economists are saying, we're going down to maybe 25,000. 25% unemployment. So with 25% unemployment, we're back in the Great Depression.
Yeah.
We're back to where Herbert Hoover dug the hole so deep that it took a decade for FDR to dig us back out of it. So why don't we just start out where we're going to be forced to wind up? Why don't we just put the money into the hands of those family members so they can buy the food, buy the medicine, pay the rent, pay the mortgage, pay the car payments, pay everything else they're going to need in order to be able to survive. We'll put it on the cuff for the federal government. It might cost $3 trillion. It might cost $4 trillion. It might cost $5 trillion. But Only the federal government can do it. Let's put the money in the hands of these family members. They'll have the buying power then to buy the products that are being sold, to do the things that need to be done. So we'll reduce the overall burden. But we do know that women are going to be the ones that are most adversely affected. They're going to be the ones having to do the childcare, have the job, need the income in order to continue to provide for their family. So it's just a realistic way of looking at the disproportionate economic gap that already exists between Black women, Latinas, but women in general only make 80 cents on the dollar for a white man. And what we say right up front is, why don't we start out where we're going to be forced to wind up anyway? Why don't we just get out of the denial of Donald Trump? Oh, everything's going to go away. It's going to be beautiful. And you guys all go to swimming pools out there in Missouri. Don't even worry about it. You guys all go to the beach. Don't worry about it, right? Well, this thing's going to be a huge boomerang. He's sowing the seeds for his own future economic problems right now by being unrealistic about the power of this disease. So our view is, let's put the money in the hands of the families, and knowing that women will be the disproportionate beneficiary of this. And so that's how Kamala and Bernie and I are viewing it. And it's getting it gets a lot of, there's a lot of people rallying behind this idea. And we're going to have it out with Mitch McConnell on the Senate floor over the next month. But our goal is to just speak truth to power, just to say, hey, this is the way it's going to be. These people are going to be unemployed. These people have lost their jobs. 27 million people have lost their health insurance in 2.5 months. That's on top of the 30 million who already did not have health insurance. So what's the answer? Well, the answer is, let's give them some money in their pocket, but it's also Medicare for all. It's also Medicare for all. Let's just talk about that. Medicare for all says to every woman, yeah, you're guaranteed. You're guaranteed healthcare coverage. You're guaranteed the healthcare which you need for you and your family. So it's going to give us our moment, our FDR moment here. Start to raise these big ideas. But I think it's inevitable that people come to them. Just say, you're right. Doesn't make any sense. The federal government can borrow the money. Right now, it's 0% interest. So if you're ever going to borrow, it should be 0% federal government. Just borrow it,
absolutely.
put it on the cuff, send the money out to families, and then they can use it for what they need. And in the bargain, we should also be talking about Medicare for all, to be honest with you, so that we're being realistic about how long this is going to last, and it's going to last a long time, and how desperate people are going to be without health care, especially.
Well, and you know this, but women don't go back to work without childcare. I mean, as you know, I have a 5-year-old and 2-year-old at home, and 2 working moms, and we don't go back to work until we have childcare. We don't go back to work full time until we have childcare.
And Elizabeth Warren, she introduced a bill for childcare, like $50 billion piece of legislation. Now I co-sponsored with her. Yeah. To say, let's just get realistic. The economic system cannot recover without childcare.
Yeah.
It just can't. Yeah. And so it's that's central to this. Just understanding how our economy works.
Yeah. Right. And I know Congresswoman Clark did the same thing on the House side. So it has to be part of the conversation.
Catherine did a great job. Yeah, absolutely great job.
I'm mindful of the time. I'm hogging the conversation. I could keep going, but I'm going to ask my colleague Kate, who so kindly moderates questions for us, to hop on and give us a couple of questions for the senator.
Hi, Senator Markey. I was an organizer in your first Senate campaign, so it's exciting to keep working with you. Our first question today is wondering about the Hyde Amendment. And I know that's something that a lot of people have changed their opinion and evolved in. And I'm wondering if you could talk about your history with the Hyde Amendment.
Yeah, well, about 38 years ago, about 4 decades ago, I had to decide whether or not it was a religion that decided who got it, or it was just the law under the United States Constitution who got it. so I just decided that was the wrong law, the wrong position. And so long ago and far away, 38 years ago, I just said, no, I'm against Hyde. The decision should just be between a woman and her physician. That's it, and that's where I've been, throughout my career, especially my career in the Senate, where I really stand up. And that's where my opposition to Gorsuch and Kavanaugh really comes from, knowing, that they're just the thin edge of the wedge trying to get in there and opening up more and more exceptions. And I believe ultimately it's just a woman who has the right to make that decision. So that's where I've been for 38 years in my congressional career.
Kate, what's next?
One moment. Sorry, I'm going through questions. If anyone has a Q&A, please feel free to submit them. Following up on that question, what do you think can be done in terms of funding abortion with Medicaid, knowing that, that's not the current landscape except for in a few states, including ours?
I actually believe that we've got a revolutionary moment on our hands. I think that we can run up huge majorities in the House and the Senate. Huge. I just think there's a wave coming. I mean, we have to be part of the energy to create that wave. But if we do it and we do it correctly, we can just absolutely create kind of a supermajority, or the political pressure, the momentum that makes it possible for us to build that into Medicaid. So from my perspective, we're at the turning point. This is it. This is our 1932. Mm-hmm. It was a wave, and Trump is creating the conditions by which we can have a wave. We're going to have the 1918 pandemic combined with the Great Depression unemployment rate, combined with Rodney King-like reactions to the racism that's built into our society. And we have to take this moment to bring our case to the American people. And I think we have an excellent chance to just put in place the kind of protections for women, including access to Medicaid for abortions. It's just part of a woman's medical rights in our country.
You've raised equal pay a couple times, which I really appreciate, because I think it's part and parcel of having access to healthcare. You probably saw that Stephanie Ebert had a great story in the Globe last week, again, which feels like 1,000 years ago, about the pandemic and gender equality implications. And obviously women, we're going to lose workplace gains that we've made over the last few decades. And I'm wondering if in the conversations about economic recovery, the issue of equal pay for equal work legislation has come up, and if you think that's a potential reality if and when the president is no longer our president and we have a Democratic president.
Well, the first law that we passed in 2009, when we won the House, the Senate, and Obama was sworn in, was the Lilly Ledbetter Act. That was the very first law we went through, and it was the issue of pay equity for women, no discrimination in the workplace. So I think that, especially with Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker of the House, I think a further iteration of that position, equal pay for equal work, made even stronger, can be the law. And we can do it next year.
Yeah.
I mean, no one saw Lilly Ledbetter on the scoreboard at the beginning of 1988, in January of 88. In January of 2008, it wasn't on the scoreboard. In January of 2009, Obama was signing the bill.
Yeah.
And so, see, I do believe in political momentum, and you have to take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. Trump is creating the conditions for a huge political tsunami, and I think equal pay is going to be right at the top of the list, because Nancy Pelosi, if anything, You want her in the meeting with the other leaders of the Senate and the White House, because she will get that. And so it's just another reason why we've got to have someone who could sign it, a president, and a Senate that can take it up,
Yep.
and pass it, and get it to the president. So I'm an optimist about it.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. You've been so generous to give me an hour of your time to pick your brain. And I want to be mindful of everyone's time who joined us today and wrap things up. And, thank you for diving into the conversation about the racialized violence that we're seeing in our country, and also how the pandemic intersects with issues of equity and reproductive freedom. I know I feel grateful to be in a state that has two such forceful senators who are committed to making our country a more equal place. Thank you for all you do. Just a quick word to people joining us on Facebook and in Zoom. One of the things that we've been talking about as an organization is donating to organizations that are Black-led racial justice organizations working on the ground in Minnesota, in Massachusetts, across the country. Our staff has been looking at the Black Visions Collective, at Reclaim the Block, the Massachusetts Bail Fund, Sisters Unchained, Violence in Boston, and the Union of Minority Neighborhoods. We really hope that people are looking out for opportunities to participate in local events, whether it's in person or virtually, to show support for racial justice. There's going to be a rally today, which a link will be in the chat box, and a vigil for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, hosted by Black Lives Matter. There's digital events across the state. I know that Surge is having a white affinity space tonight, taking place on Zoom. So I just really encourage all of the people here to take advantage of those resources. And quickly, one small plug for NARAL Massachusetts. We transitioned our annual fundraiser, Champions for Choice, into a virtual fundraiser. Senator Markey will be making a cameo. He's been so kind to us to do that. It's taking place virtually on June 11th. You do not have to pay to sign up. So I would love to have as many people come as possible. It's going to be about half an hour at 7 p.m. and we are honoring Senator Kirsten Gillibrand, which I'm really delighted about. There'll be a link in the chat box. And Senator Markey, thank you so much for making time for us today. We appreciate it.
No, listen, thank you, Rebecca. Thank you to everybody out there. Row Act, go get them.
We're going to get it done.
Title 10. We're gonna fight and win. So let's just keep our spirits high. We can see how desperate people are out there on the streets of our country, and they're looking for help. They're looking for people who will partner with them. And I think this is our moment. I think this is our moment where we bring the country together, even as the president's trying to divide us. You can't make America great again by making America hate again. That's what he's trying to do. And you represent just the opposite of that. So thank you for giving me this great opportunity to chat with you today. And anything that I can do, you just have to reach out and I'll be there.
I will. Don't worry. You can count on it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye, folks.